All human wisdom is contained in these two words: wait and hope. Yesterday, I finished The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandere Dumas. And this is the first classic I've read since creating any of my social media for books. This is the first classic I've read probably since graduating college. And it's interesting because I've read a few classics. I've read the ones that people are expected to read as an American high school student. I've read 1984. I've read, Crime and Punishment. I read, Catcher in the Rye. I read War of the Worlds. I read a few genre-defying, you need to read these essential classics. But classics are not necessarily something I traditionally go out of my way to read. There's a few that I've really enjoyed over the years. I'm a big fan of the Iliad and Odyssey. I'm a huge fan of, Greek tragedy and Greek epic poems. I'm a huge fan of Shakespeare. Most people don't know that about me, but I love Shakespeare. So, there's some classics that I have loved over the years. But for the most part, I avoid them because, traditionally they're not like the most exciting things on earth to read. Usually they're filled with dialogue and philosophy or discussions about things in the real world where, I acknowledge that they exist, but sometimes I just want escapism. I mean, that's usually what I'm reading for, is escapism and entertainment. And classics, while they can provide those things, and there's some I've read that definitely don't necessarily trend towards what I'm looking for in books. But The Count of Monte Cristo is an interesting exception because this is a book that I've wanted to read since middle school. I mean, this is a book that I've known about forever, and people have discussed forever around me, and I've heard, discussions online and in person at college and at high school, and at, jobs and everything in between about how great the Count of Monte Cristo is. You have to read The Count of Monte Cristo. If you're going to read any classic, it's got to be The Count of Monte Cristo. It's probably, at least in the West, the most famous classic of all time outside the Iliad, Odyssey, and maybe War and Peace. I mean, this is a classic that everybody knows by name. I've never met a single person in my entire life that wasn't at least vaguely aware of The Count of Monte Cristo. And it's been hugely influential to what I like to call the Western canon and Western literature in general. I mean, it's inspired everything. Comics, anime, TV shows, movies, everything has been inspired by The Count of Monte Cristo because it's simply that great of a classic. It's that big of a classic. I mean, it's so huge that it's like everybody knows what The Count of Monte Cristo is about. It's gotten multiple adaptations in multiple forms. It's gotten at least 2 movie releases I know of, and one literally came out last year. So it's a huge book. When it comes to popularity, it's a classic that defines expectation. It's just so massive, and I've wanted to read it for years now, but I've always been like putting it on pause because it's a big book. It's a very big book. I think it's like over 400,000 words. My copy is 1,000 pages, over 1,000 pages actually, and the average copy is like 1,200 pages or more. And when I first got back into reading, I put this on my TBR, and I've had it on my TBR for like 3 years now, and I've just been waiting for the right moment to like just sit down and read it. And that moment finally came about 2 weeks ago. A friend of mine was selling this beautiful edition, I'll put it up on the screen, of The Count of Monte Cristo, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna buy it, and then I'm going to try and find an Audible or an audio, and I'm just going to listen and read it, and I'll finally have been able to say I've finished The Count of Monte Cristo. So that's what I've been doing for the last 2 weeks. That's why I've been MIA from the internet, because this is a big book. I mean, this is the longest it's taken me to finish a book in a very long time. I'm a pretty quick reader, and I got through this pretty quick, at at least compared to its size. But, this took me like 13 days, almost 14 days to finish. But man, this was excellent. I mean, this is a total masterwork. I am almost kicking myself for how long it's taken me to finally get around to reading this. But I'm glad that I've waited, because I don't know if I'd have fully appreciated everything that Dumas has done in this book as much as I did without getting back into reading in the way that I have. So what makes the Count of Monte Cristo so great? Because you've heard of it by now. You know what this story is about. It's a revenge story. It's, some people call it an adventure. Some people call it an epic. It's a lot of things. So what makes it so great? What makes this doorstopper, this book that you could probably kill a person with, worth reading? Well, what's interesting to me about this story is that originally it was serialized in a newspaper, and so Dumas, Alexandere Dumas, the author, was paid by the word to write this. But when you actually sit down and read it, it doesn't feel that way at all. This is a long book, obviously, and yet there is this incredible plot throughout this narrative following Edmond Dantes, who is our main character. He's the Count of Monte Cristo. He is this, at first, very benevolent, kind man who, he's coming up in the world. His fortune is striking. The lightning, the rod is hot for Dantes. Lightning. He's caught in a bottle. He's about to be married to this beauty. He just got promoted, and then these three men have decided to use him in a way that leads him to being jailed for over a decade of his life. And the entire story is revolving around him coming and trying to get his revenge, and trying to get back at these men for putting him in jail. And, with a book this long, you would think there's no possible way that the author can possibly sustain enough suspense and enough intrigue for me to care in this long of a book. Vengeance should be quick. It should strike hot. It shouldn't take this long to build. But what Alexandre does here, what Dumas does here, is he builds and he builds and he builds and he builds, and he throws all this intrigue and character interaction and story at you that just builds off one another. And at first, there are going to be parts where I guarantee most people will be like, why was this included? This kind of just feels like fluff. But by the end, you're going to look back and you're going to say, oh, that was Dante's plan all along. I see where this is going now. Like, there were just so many moments where, like, the lightning just struck my head because I was struggling, and then something happened, and I was like, wait a second, like, that's why this is happening. So I think that's something that, like, really makes this book so incredible, is that Dumas is always giving you something to chew on. This book is not going to be for everyone. This is a slow-paced book. I mean, it's a big book. It's like 1,300 pages. It's absolutely massive. It's huge. And for some, maybe the prose is going to kind of be a turnoff because the language isn't exactly modern. It's very modern compared to some of its works that surround it. This is by no means a hard book to get through, in my opinion. But some people might, not love the way that this is written. Some people might not love the characters. Some people might not love the pacing, or maybe you'll go into this with the expectation that this is going to be some sort of action-packed thriller. It's not. It's a character study, and it's a book that takes time for it to build and culminate, and all these plots and all these ideas and all these themes are trying to just come together and be mixed. You know what I mean? Like, this is a book that I would suggest take your time with, because it's doing a lot. I mean, there's like 50 characters in this, and they're all pretty flushed out. I mean, there's a ton of side characters in this. You spend a ton of time with multiple characters over multiple chapters, very long chapters, and it's really the thesis of this book is, what is vengeance? What is good and evil? Does God favor those who have been wronged? And if you can get into that, if you can get into the philosophy, if you can get into the kind of themes that drive this story and drive these characters and that Dumas is exploring, if you like, spending time in 19th century France, for the most part, you're also going to be in Italy too. But if you like spending time in 19th century France and just kind of seeing what's going on in the world at that time, and spending time with the aristocracy and just kind of seeing how they live, and it's very fleshed out. There's tons of dialogue. There's a ton of like political intrigue. I'll call it political intrigue, like just rich people just doing crazy stuff, and you kind of see how they used to live back then. If you can get into that, this is going to be a great book. But I want to have the expectations set properly. This is not like a swashbuckling, you're going to just rip through this kind of story. It's built slowly. It burns slowly. This is a big book, and it takes its time in its telling. It's an epic. It's definitely what I would consider like a fictional historical epic. I mean, this is steeped in, real world 19th century politics after the fall of Napoleon Bonaparte. And even parts of this are before Bonaparte falls. And there is discussion around those things. If you like that kind of stuff, if you like learning about real world history, and you like, a main character who is this just like symbol of vengeance, but he's also this incredible man, He's almost the Superman of his time. He's the Batman of his time. If you can get into that, you're going to have a very good time. But I want, again, to warn you, this is a slow book. This is not going to be for everyone. But there is so many things that this story does exceptional. The prose is beautiful. The character work is magnificent. There is a great sense of romance in this book, and I don't just mean romance between a man and a woman, but I mean romance as in just general love for your fellow human being. That's explored extraordinarily in this book, is loving thy friend and what it means to be thy neighbor. The themes here are incredible. There's vengeance, there's good and evil, there's providence, there's, what is God's will? What can a man redeem himself? It really examines the human soul on so many different levels. And, there's this underlying theme of love and compassion underneath it all. And for me, it's just one of those books where I can't wait to reread it eventually. I'm not going to reread it anytime soon because, again, it's a very long book. It took me a very long time to read it. But I'm excited to read it again at some point in the future because I just feel like it's one of those stories that it'll stick with me for the rest of my life. Again, probably not going to be for everyone. Probably not going to, work for, the audience I've necessarily culminated. I know that I've kind of created an audience that's very biased towards science fiction, fantasy, horror, and I'm very happy about that. But, if you're someone who's, you're like, I want to expand beyond my horizons, I want to try something different, I would highly recommend The Count of Monte Cristo. I can't guarantee that it'll work for you, but I would recommend it anyways because it's a story that I think, if you give it a chance, you'll come to appreciate. There are parts I wish weren't as slow. There were moments where I struggled a little. I'll fully admit, it's been a long time since I've read a classic, especially a 19th century classic. But it's so amazing in so many ways. I mean, this is a really, really rich story. And it's one that I think deserves its spot as, one of the most beloved classics of all time. This is, the classic that everybody talks about for a very good reason. So if what I say interests you, please read The Count of Monte Cristo. It's a very good story. I mean, it's brilliant. It's a masterwork. Not a masterpiece, but a masterwork. And I'm going to give it a solid 9 out of 10. And it's definitely up in contention for Book of the Year for me. I mean, it's just that incredible. It was so good. Please read it.